Hello, how is everybody today? My name is Lauren Panruka and I am going to be hosting today's Instagram Live Griffith University Alumni Takeover. We are going to be talking with Professor Daryl Jones about living with animals and wildlife in suburban areas. So I am very excited about today. You can see that I've chosen a spot that I think is quite fitting. It's very beautiful here in New Farm Park, and I think very soon we will be joined. So until then, please just enjoy staring at my silly face.
Hi, how are you?
Two beautiful faces. How are you, Daryl?
Very well, thanks.
I have given you a very production, but I would love for you to go through underneath your web signature because it's very, very long and large. So depending on what you title yourself and what your roles are in those different organizations that are all listed.
I'm a professor at Griffith. I've got a whole lot of different things that I'm doing, but for the purposes of this talk, I'm an urban ecologist. I study the animals in cities. That's who I am, really.
Amazing. Okay, well, I've mentioned to the people watching, of which there are quite a few, that most talking about today is living in harmony, not possible, with the animals that are, I guess, you could say organically in that landscape anyway. So the examples that come in magpies, it's the picture that we chose to use to demonstrate what we were going to be talking about today, but there are a number of other animals that I can think off the top of my head that I will see any given day attempting to live in Brisbane City.
Absolutely. So magpies is the big one, obviously. This is we're coming just out of the peak at the moment. It's around the peak of magpie swooping is late September, early October. So we're coming out of that now, pretty much. We do have to ask the question: why are they doing this? What's this horrible thing that they do? Nonetheless, everybody loves magpies, but they still swoop us. It's primarily about them looking after their chicks. The males, whose job it is to keep what they regard as threats and predators away from their nest. They decide for some reason that only magpies understand that certain people are a threat, and so they try to send us a message to keep away from their precious babies. That's pretty much what's happening. Why they do it, why specific people do it, is still a mystery.
Well, you've answered my question. I was going to say we did have somebody write in earlier today and say that she's particularly targeted by this one magpie. And you know, did you have any comments on that, or something maybe she has?
Yeah, no, I can say something about that, Lauren. For some weird reason, well, first thing I should say is only about 10% of any magpies anywhere even look sideways at people. 90% or more magpies never ever swoop us. It's really important to know that. And it only happens during the breeding season when there's chicks in the nest. It's only the males and it's only really near the trees. But of the magpies that swoop pedestrians, which is about 50% of the aggressive magpies, those birds pick usually just one person. Now, I don't know the person who put the question in there, but I'm pretty sure she didn't climb a tree and eat a baby magpie, therefore proving that she's a predator. It's obviously doesn't have to be that extreme, but it happens all the time, and so people get victimized. It's crazy.
So we've just a question come through that says, is it only the male magpies that swoop?
Yep, that's the male's job to keep the predators away, and that would be normally, cats and dogs and snakes and goannas and all that sort of thing. So the strange mystery is why they've decided that people are a threat, but that's what they're doing. And it still makes no sense, but it gives me lots of research time to try and understand and uncover that particular mystery.
Yeah. Magpies go back to that same. Yes, that's true or false.
I'm sorry, Lauren, you broke up there a bit. I couldn't quite catch that last question.
Recognise they've.
I'm probably talking about recognising people's faces. Yes, that's what they do. They can recognise us. So that magpies live in one location for their whole lives. And they live for 20 years or more. So they will see kids grow up. They know all the people in that small area in the suburbs, if that's where it is. And that might be 20 or 30 people. And they know every single person. And they can remember them for long, long periods of time. The record I've got is 15 years. So they recognise us. So they know exactly who you are. Just a little aside is that in Melbourne this year, there seems to be a suggestion that more magpies were attacking more people. Now, that might be because they couldn't actually recognise their faces because they're all wearing masks. Possible thing. It's a possibility, but who knows?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so obviously we've talked about magpies. It's the start of the season. It's a part of the Australian culture and what we all expect. I was very tempted to wear a helmet with the zip ties on. It's a bit of a joke, but I didn't get my things organised in time. But what is the animal that we are attempting to live with that you think is relevant to bring up in this conversation about living in harmony with creatures?
Yeah, so magpies is the classic example. Even though they swoop us all the time, some swoop us all the time, we still vote for them as the favourite bird in Australia. When people feed birds, for example, the favourite bird that they most want to feed are magpies. So they're really clear. You know, every second football team seems to be called the Magpies, and all that sort of stuff. They're very popular. But there's plenty of others. Sorry?
I said I'm a sucker for a kookaburra, so I'm really surprised to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's magpies is it. But so when we make a city, when we make a suburb, we totally transform the landscape. All that normal habitat that those animals would be living in is gone. So, and most of the animals that would have lived there, they just have to disappear. A very small proportion of them are able to come back and live successfully with us, and some of them do that. They all do that on their own terms. The magpies just say, we don't care, we're going to keep you away, we're going to treat you like just another animal. And that's the case with most of them. It's a bit more demonstrative with magpies, but there's also all the other animals that have done really well. Brush turkeys, possums in the roof everywhere, and there's an increasing number of birds and mammals which are doing really well, and they are just making the most of it. But if you want to live successfully in the city, the fundamental thing you've got to do, if you're the animal, is lose your natural, instinctive, sensible fear of humans. Humans are a good thing to be scared of. But if you can overcome that and take absolutely no notice of them and completely disregard the threat that they are, you can live anywhere and do anything, and you have an amazing number of resources and opportunities to take advantage of. And that's what all these particular animals have done. They've done, you know, they saw an opportunity and went for it.
You'll have to forgive the audio if there's an airplane going.
It's an airplane. Right? Oh, airplane. Cool.
Okay, an airplane. I was just going to ask, there are magpies in backyard or front yard or somewhere very them appropriately?
Yeah, okay. So, yes, of course, people live with magpies everywhere, and they're in your own front yard. But of course, those birds know who you are. One of the things to talk about in the context of this conversation we're having, Lauren, is that you can actually stop a magpie that swoops you by feeding them. And if they can turn completely and very rapidly into a tame bird just by you doing something nice to them. And so that's a real thing. I've seen that so many times. It's a recognised thing you can do. But it only works for the magpies that know you personally.
There's no downside to their ecosystem if we're
yeah, no. There's plenty of downsides to feeding wild birds and native animals like that the wrong thing. And unfortunately, it's so convenient, but nearly everybody who feeds magpies, and lots of people do, they feed them mince, and that's a terrible food for magpies. So I'm a bit on a mission at the moment to try and get people to feed them something else. Mince just doesn't have enough calcium. It's sticky and horrible, and it gets stuck in their beaks. So if you're out there and you feed magpies, change to some sort of pet food, anything like that, and there's a lot of different products you can use. But if we want to feed animals, that's fine. You can do it properly, as long as it's not too much. You're really careful about keeping the container clean, and you think about the birds and don't feed them human foods. That's really important.
Okay. We've had a question here, and I hope I read this right. It says, are butcher birds at the top of the hierarchy and therefore feed them to tame magpies?
It depends on what hierarchy we're talking about. I mean, the magpies look after the magpies would disagree with that hierarchy and putting them on the top. Except that what's happened at the moment is there's been a reclassification. This is a bit nerdy, but magpies have just been called another butcher bird. They're just the biggest butcher bird. Now, some people contest that, and that's a big argument among the nerds around the place. But if that's the case, then they're just the biggest butcher bird. Butcher birds also attack us, but not as many times, and and they also love to feed from us. Lots of people feed the butcherbirds as well.
Great. Why do magpies have such long tails?
Long tails. Well, they're good. They're really good in the air, and a tail helps with their manoeuvrability in the air. So sometimes they'll fly up and catch little insects on the wing. So they're very good at that changing direction while they're flying. And any bird that is a good flyer must have a good fat tail that they can span out or make thin. So that's the main reason.
Okay. So if there was one takeaway for the community to grab conversation, what do you think that would be? Do you think it's the comment about not feeding them mince, or is there something that you feel is more pressing to really help people understand that living with these birds is super achievable?
The main thing to realise is that we have destroyed their landscape. Some birds, like magpies, have been able to move back in with us. We have to respect that very strongly. In other places, nearly every species is just disappearing. But the few species like magpies and butcherbirds and crows and all the other birds that have come back into the city with us, they need to be appreciated for what they are. They're truly wild animals that have returned to live with us. We need to respect them in that location so we can all coexist really well together. So sometimes you can feed them, sometimes you shouldn't, but treat them as other coexisters in the city along with everybody else.
Can you relocate a bird or a family of birds if they are particularly aggressive to your family?
You can, and that's what they do pretty much all the time in Queensland. If it's a really bad bird, a magpie that's really bad, we actually did this for 7 years. I was the person that actually worked out how this should be done properly. As long as you take them a long way, and by a long way about more than 125 kilometres, or they'll just come back before you do. If you take them a long way and out into the countryside, big open grassy fields where the magpies can live, there's a lot less magpies. It'll still be magpie territory because magpies are found everywhere. If you let them go there, they can't come back. They don't come back. They settle down somewhere else. They stop being aggressive, and they just find another partner and live somewhere else. So it can be done very, very successfully. The translocation thing is very controversial, but it can be done.
Can you walk me through what that process would look like if you're, say, a mother or a father and you've got little kids around you and there's this bird that's mental and you need to him or her the bird. Nest, bird, box, family car, like what does that look like? Do you have to take parents?
You can't do it yourself. You must not do it yourself. It's completely illegal to interfere with a native bird. But there are lots of companies around who will do it for you. It'll cost you some amount of money, or schools will do this all the time. And what they do is they come along. Catching a magpie is super simple if you've got another magpie. They are so utterly territorial that you simply need a magpie in a small cage. You put that down on the ground. About a millisecond later, the magpie who lives there will be there saying, "Who the hell's this in my area? What the hell?" And all you need to do is put a larger cage around it with a little door in it, and it just goes straight in to beat the crap out of the magpie that's safely and cowering now inside the other cage. I think my record was probably 4 seconds of catching one.
Wow.
But so there's lots of people around the place who can do that professionally. They are trained to do it. And that's the standard, that's the policy now for really aggressive magpies. In Queensland, unlike some other states, which I won't name, they get shot, which is completely irresponsible and doesn't need to happen. Here we take them for a trip. They survive happily somewhere else. And what happens back in their home territory is a new male moves in and the female just says, "You're black and white, you'll do your job," and everything goes on according to whatever their plan is.
We did have a question before, and I'm sorry I can't get back to it, so I might not ask it quite correctly, but it was about their colours, the black and white, if that has something to do with mating or if it's a...
Well, no, that's what magpies mean. Magpie means black and white, and they shouldn't be called magpies. There's probably a really wonderful indigenous name, but they got named by European naturalists hundreds of years ago, so we're stuck with the bird magpie. But it's interesting that lots of the common birds around cities are black and white. Butcherbirds, magpies, magpie larks, peewees often known as, woolly wagtails, all these common urban birds are black and white. Nobody really has a good theory about why that's the case. I mean, there's plenty of colourful ones like rainbow lorikeets, but yeah, plenty of black and white birds.
Okay, interesting. We've not got any more questions coming through. Is there anything that you wanted to add or mention?
I think the main thing is to say, although there is the problem about the conflict associated with birds swooping us. We've got to remember that it's not just them hating us. That's not what it's about. It's them doing what they would normally do. It's a completely natural behaviour, and we need to take much more seriously the responsibility we've got of living with wild animals. We've destroyed their landscape so much. It's time to give them a bit of space and allow them back into where we live.
Okay. Does there seem to be an increase in currawongs in Brisbane?
Yeah, that is definitely happening. They were normally up in the mountains or up in the hills somewhere else. They've been coming down into the city, and now probably because there's so much food around, so many natural food, currawongs love stealing cat and dog food that you think you've been feeding your dog or cat, and they wait till you're not there, and then they'll shoo the cat away and eat their food. So they're taking advantage. They're very, very smart birds, currawongs, and they're taking advantage of that. And so that's definitely happening. There's a massive increase in those guys this year.
Okay, so Joanna's just asked if the zip tie helmets really work. And Joanna, I was saying that I really wanted to wear one for this event, but I didn't get my...
I'm sorry you didn't, Lauren, but no, they work really well. It's not because of anything except it looks nasty, it looks dangerous, and that's when it'll work properly. If you've just got 2 or 3 little things sticking out, it doesn't work. You've got to look like an echidna. It's got to look dangerous. And the birds don't stop swooping, but they back off. They don't come too close because I think, I'm going to get impaled on that bloody thing. So they stay back, but it's much better for the riders. So they work really well.
Okay, that's good. I always assumed that it was because they would swoop the top of the zip rather than your head, so they would be further away. But you're saying that they actually wearing that.
Well, our interpretation is that they just think it looks dangerous. It's too spiky, and they could harm themselves. So that seems to be what's going on. There's another thing I will mention just quickly is that some posties get hammered by the magpies all over the place. They've come up with their own idea. You buy a rubber mask, like an ugly mask, a witch or a zombie or something, and you stick it on backwards on the back of your helmet, and it looks like there's a face facing the backwards. And that works like a dream, they tell me all the time. And that goes to the old-fashioned thing that Grandma used to say about putting eyes on the back of an ice cream thing, the standard thing. That's never worked. It never worked. But I think it didn't work because it actually isn't a face. What you're trying to suggest to the magpie is you're being looked at from behind. Magpies always attack from behind. If they see a face looking at them, they think, oh, I can't sneak up on this guy. He's got a face at the front and the back. So they won't do it. So that's another thing you can do. If a magpie does swoop you, face it, it won't come towards you if you're looking at it. Another little hint.
I think my instinct is to protect your eyes. So, you sort of duck and cover, but you're saying make eye contact with it.
Yeah, make eye contact with it, face it. I mean, if you've just got swooped, you know for a fact, you can tell yourself, I've just walked into the vicinity of a nest. Somewhere near here, it's pretty hard to see magpie nests, but somewhere near here, I'm just walked into a zone where there's a magpie. That swooping is a very strong signal. It simply says, hey, keep away, I'm trying to protect my nest. If you do that, back away, just get out of there, looking at the magpie, and you'll be fine. That's a simple thing to do. You're trying to avoid the places where it's dangerous, and that's only near the nest.
Okay, I've got a question. So I've always pictured magpies having almost a radius around their nest, and if you enter that, attack you. If you back out of that space, will they attack you because they're in that sphere until you're far gone? Or if you step out of that direction,
and you back out, that's all you need to do. Just get away. It's around about 50 metres from the tree, which is not far. I mean, what magpies will be doing is giving a low swoop that you probably don't even notice, or a squawk that trying to give you a suggestion. Well, we're really thick. We don't get that message, so we keep going towards the nest. And they say, this guy is completely stupid. I've got to give him a much more stronger message. And that's when they hit you in the back of the head, for example. To have a zone around the tree, just keep out of it.
Okay, it's almost a line in the sand or dirt, and if you walk past that, then I'll leave it alone again.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Oh, okay, all right. That was a myth that I wasn't sure if it was fakey or true. So we've got lots of compliments on your shirt. That's just about it for updates. Is there about either how to live peacefully with them, how to avoid being swooped? Has anybody got a bird that is particularly nasty to them at the moment while we've got Daryl here? Nothing. What to add, Daryl?
Well, I mean, again, I just want to re-emphasise, I'm on a big mission to get people to just live peacefully with these birds. They're wonderful birds, and magpies especially are incredibly smart. If you think that they know all the individuals and they recognise people as they grow up, that's a really smart animal. There's been lots of studies showing just how intelligent they are. They can mimic a huge number of noises, and in fact that morning chorus, that glorious long morning chorus, is now the most complicated, most sophisticated, most detailed bird song in the world. It's got more elements than any other animal in the world. So, that's something to be proud of as well. And everybody loves the sound of the magpies in the morning.
Yeah. Where, if somebody was looking to find out more, where could they go?
More information about magpies. I'd love to be able to tell you there's a great book called Magpie Alert, How to Live with a Wild Neighbour, but it's out of print. Can't remember the author. Oh, yeah, that was me. Unfortunately, you can't buy it. It's in every library in Queensland, which is fantastic, so borrow it from the library. Every time somebody borrows that book from the library, I get 30 cents, by the way, so go for it. There's a couple of other magpie books around, but I don't recommend them because I didn't write them. But they're worth having a look at.
Amazing. And also probably Google would give you a solid point in that.
Google. Now, one thing that you should know about, and if you don't know already, there's a website called Magpie Alert, and every cyclist should know about this. Before you go on your weekend trip or anywhere, you go onto that thing and thousands of people are put down where the magpies are, and you can say, oh gosh, there's a magpie in the street where I was going to ride, and you can avoid it that way. So that's really worth having a look at. Magpie Alert.
Okay, amazing. We did have a question. Let me see if I can do magpies have homes that they live in for their whole lives? I feel like Yes?
Yes, that's right. Once they settle down with a mate, they find a male and female find each other, then they settle down and they never leave it. They never, ever leave that space. It's extraordinary. They're the most territorial bird in the world. Every single day. The reason for that extraordinary call is that saying, I'm still here, we're not moving, this is a wonderful place for us to live, don't bother even trying to come and trespass on our place. And they stay there for good, and that's why they know us so well.
Are there points in Brisbane where there are a particularly large number of them?
Yes, there's a few places, kind of no man's landy type places. I mean, most of this, anything that's suitable for magpies in Brisbane, and all you need to do is have some grassy, lawny stuff and a few trees. That's good. That's all the magpies need. There are some places like schoolyards or industrial areas where it's not so good for magpies. And so what happens, all the chicks which have to leave home, they just have, as soon as they get booted out of home, they hang around they're like teenagers at the mall with black T-shirts and listening to heavy metal music. They've got they need to go somewhere to get away from mum and dad and all the other adults. And so they go to these no-man land places, and you can see big groups of them, sometimes up to 50 youngish birds all hanging around looking sullen and telling stories about their parents. But eventually they settle down and find a mate and go off and just be like every other magpie. So there's a few places around.
Do they usually find a mate in that no man's land?
That's what happens. That's exactly what it's for. So it's this place where they, it's like it's a nightclub basically, where they all go and hang out and find each other and then eventually grow up and move away.
That's so amazing. That's fantastic. All right. Well, look, we're nearly out of time today. Is there anything else that you wanted to comment on before I wrap things up? I'm so grateful for your time today. This has been really, really interesting. I think this is an area where there's lots of old tales, there's lots of myths, lots of misunderstandings.
Absolutely.
Birds getting really so I think it's great. And we've got some it. If you that a little bit earlier, this video will be uploaded. So have to watch it again. It was masks and spiky helmets. More zip ties, the better, was the general the idea. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Lauren. That's fantastic.
Okay.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was really great to have you.